it's so much more cooler to say that you got it from an artist than you got it from Amazon. Just saying.
Oh,
And
well,
it's like,
absolutely.
of course, yeah. And like you can always find like some cool stuff like at, Home Goods and things like that. But like to find something that's unique that has a story tied to it.
Hello, welcome back to season 2 here of the podcast, The Real West Michigan. Today we have Liz Donoghue, illustrator, art educator, among other things. So we're here to talk a little bit about mushroom art. So mushroom art and her story. So let's just get started.
Sure.
So tell us about maybe little Liz. Like what was life like when you're
Liz.
little? How'd you get into art?
Oh gosh. Well, as the story goes, my mom always says I just started drawing just happy faces over and over again. I always had crayons and paper, and I asked her one time, like, what's the first drawings you remember me doing? And she's like, well, you're just doing like this happy face, doot, doot, smile, doot, doot, smile, doot, doot, smile. And she said, I'm like, how old was I? So she's probably like 3. So I'd say like when I was 3, I really started getting into art, just getting those crayons and paper out. But I don't know, I started just, drawing in notebooks. I remember asking my mom getting like just blank notebooks, and I would draw on those all the time. And so, like in preschool and kindergarten, and I remember in first grade just having just little notebooks of drawing like faces and animals and things like that. And
were these more like
start from there.
Cartoonish or realistic? What was kind of your?
That's a good question. It was mostly just cartoons and things, or just things I make up, like people. I really like Disney princesses and things like that. So just trying to draw, girls with like long pretty hair and lips and makeup and drawing animals and things that I liked. It wasn't until probably like middle school I really was into video games, so I tried and draw a lot of video game characters and cartoons from TV. So things like SpongeBob and Rugrats and like all the 90s cartoons. Now that I think about it more, it's probably more in elementary as well. Just just drawing cartoons and things like that I liked. And then we got into more like drawing bands or musicians that I really like. So,
what were some of those?
Oh, I always liked Reliant K and Reliant K. I was like, I didn't draw anybody else, but I like the Final Fantasy games and Kingdom Hearts. I would draw all the characters from that, or from anime cartoons like Full Metal Alchemist, and just drawing things from observation. So I always wanted to draw things realistically. I mostly stuck with like pencils and graphite pencil, but so I didn't really. I still enjoyed like just making things. Like if there was like a craft at some kind of event or school or church or whatever, and just being like, we're going to make this, I'm all about it, whatever it was. So I always enjoyed just like making things.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of your maiden name being craft, and maybe that add a little hint there.
There's always that joke where when I was, especially as a teacher and teaching, elementary kids, of like saying, my name is Mrs. Kraft. Like they're like, oh, I'm like, what? They're like, that's why you became an art teacher, because your name's Mrs. Kraft. I'm like, guess you could say that. That's true. So yeah, I think it was just woven into my name. I just enjoyed crafts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been into crafts and wanting to make stuff.
Yeah, I think that's brings a lot of joy in life. My girls they've all really enjoyed arts and crafts at some point.
Yeah,
some more than others.
Just something to make. And sometimes I think everyone has that like spark of just like, because everyone has that a way to be creative or just like to make something, whether it's just writing or singing or, just trying to like figure out something like in cooking or whatever. There's always some kind of creative element trying to make it your own, or just even just expressing yourself a little bit. I think it's important. So
for sure.
Yeah.
I think everybody, even the analytical accountant types, engineers, like there's some creativity in there.
Exactly. Like if you're trying to think of like, solve a problem, and they're wanting you to think like a creative way, like, well, we got to figure this out. And sometimes you have to involve like creative thinking to try and figure something out, right? I think you're getting a little off topic, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. So let's tell us a little. Let's start with a little bit of overview of what you do now, without going too deep, and then we'll rewind back to like childhood and kind of how you started taking it.
I'll probably reference it or talk about it a lot more. So, What was your question?
Well, actually, let's just go back. Let's keep on the trail here.
Sure.
So kind of middle school, high school, college. Keep on.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So like I said, I was just doing a lot of just copying. That's pretty common in middle school and high school, just drawing your own, like what you see and what you know. It wasn't probably until like high school trying to figure out, of course, like what you want to do in life and what do you want to do. And I've always loved teaching, and I always thought I'm going to be a teacher. And but I always like wanted to be an artist. And some of my friends were expressing they want to go to college for creative studies because they're like, I think it, you know, is a really cool school. It seems really cool. It's in Detroit. And so I started looking into that as well. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go for the art education route and still be an artist as well and try to do both. So that's kind of where I kind of started going on the path of being an art teacher and still being an illustrator. So when I chose like my major and everything, I was like, oh, I like to go into illustration. Though it was really hard to pick because I like to make everything, like I was mentioning before. So I really liked, you know, making things out of clay or like making things out of a cardboard or just like putting something together. So it was really hard to pick either should I do crafts, you know, work with clay and fibers and all those things, or should I go into illustration? So I chose illustration because it's more versatile and kind of go into a little of everything. So it kind of covers a lot. So I went there in art education.
So for those of us on the west side of the state here, might not be familiar with CCS, College Creative Studies. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So College Creative Studies is in Detroit. It's near Wayne State University, which a lot of people know about Wayne State a little bit. It's a really small, College Creative Studies is a really small school. It's like 3 buildings all in a little circle, and then that's about it. And they have like one other building like a half a mile or a mile away. And so it's, I forget how long it's been around, but yeah, it's like near Midtown Detroit.
I just remember back in the day when I was in printing 20 some years ago, we did their catalog. Like it was a really impressive, and it was really cool looking at some of the art.
Yeah.
In that catalog, it was used for, it was just almost like a whole bunch of samples used for recruiting, I think, and for donations probably.
Yeah.
But it just looked like an awesome place to go to school.
It's wild how when I first get there, I was actually just talking about alumni friend because we just met up, how we just, when you first get into like art school and you kind of put in this perspective, it's like you were like the best at your school, maybe the best artist, the best in your class, and then now you're like in a pool of like all the best that were in the best in their schools, and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone is so talented, and it's like intimidating, but it's a lot of fun. You really learn a lot from other people and what everyone else is into, and yeah, it's really cool.
It's kind of that iron sharpens iron. You know, you get better the higher the competition.
Yeah. And
it's not even competition necessarily.
No,
you just learn and tips and tricks from others.
Exactly. And you kind of humble yourself a little bit and say, like, you know, we can learn from each other, even if maybe we don't have the same style or the same direction or even the same major, because everyone kind of helps each other. Like, hey, I heard about this thing. You'd be really awesome at it. Or like, I'm going to this gallery, or I'm going to this like art opening, or I'm going to this workshop. Like, you should go because, you know, you kind of, like you said, helping each other out kind of thing. And even after being out of school, you know, I feel everyone contacts other people just to ask questions like, hey, what are you doing with your, you know, in your career? What are you doing? How'd you get there? And everyone's not afraid to be like, oh, I did this. This is how I did that. And same with professors there. They're even willing to help out or like talk to you or, yeah.
So, you know, we'll pause here for a little bit with somebody, a new artist thinking about going to college or not going to college, trying to figure out what they want to do. You know, what kind of advice would you give to somebody, you know, maybe just graduating high school that's thinking about maybe going to art school? What would you recommend?
That's a good question. I don't think it's a necessity to go to college for art. I've seen a lot of people be very successful by not going to art school at all. Because you could still, especially now in the age of the internet and other artists and access to so many resources that anyone can really make art and study it without actually going to a university. So I would say that if down the road, now it's like on the other side of the coin though, you have access to going to like a university and networking with so many different other artists and finding, may say, a professor, it's a mentor to kind of help you move into a direction. So there's definitely benefits for going to like an art school and studying, or even just going to college to study art, because you have those ways or resources right there in front of you. So I would say it's not necessarily something you need to do, because there's I don't know, like I found a lot more resource and help from other places.
Yeah.
Like online and like connecting with other artists and help, and just it's more so I feel if you're just putting in the work to grow as an artist. Like I'm like say you're being like a painter. And it's like you're painting every day. You're finding other ways to find inspiration and sharpen your skills, and reading books and watching videos and copying things and just trying to like sharpen the skills as being a painter. And then you can start reaching out to other painters and finding out like, oh, how do you get into whatever it is, gallery work or books or whatever. And then I think it's just, putting the hard work however you want to do it. And if you feel like going to school is going to be like the next step, that's totally, I hope that I'm kind of like, I feel like I
No, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Exactly. I think that's why I'm struggling, because it's like, it's almost like whatever you want to do, because I feel like you can still be a successful artist whether or not you go to college or not, I guess is what my final answer is. Is if you're putting the hard work and actually like growing, because it's not going to fall in your lap. And that's the thing too of being art. There's that argument like anyone can make art. I'm just going to draw something and throw it out there, and it seems easy. I can just like throw something in there and just draw something and be I can sell that. And it's not necessarily as easy as I think a lot of people think that art is. So it's like you have to actually sit down and put down the hours of like, I'm going to grow as an artist and put in the time to get better and then grow from there. So
I think any profession, occupation, you have to continue to always learn also.
Yeah.
And now there's just so much education free on YouTube or other outlets. There's paid art. You can do these little subscriptions on classes on individual. Pretty much anything you want, you can find.
Yeah, like all those like workshops, like Skillshare and like Patreon, and exactly my point. Like there's a lot of different ways because some people don't have the chance to go to university, and it's like, well, now I can't be successful, right? It's like that disappointment. It's like I'm not gonna be able to be whatever career or like opportunities are not gonna come my way. But there, like you said, there's so many resources and ways that people can find so that they actually can do those things. So
yeah,
I think it's cool.
So there was something I had. Oh, Atomic Habits. So this is something you were going on about putting in the work, and I think it was in Atomic Habits they talked about. They referenced some study where one group of students had a whole semester to work on pottery.
Yeah.
And they had one group that had to design the best piece of pottery they could at the end of the semester. And then the other group they had to make as many pieces of pottery every day. They had to make a new piece. And then by the end of the semester, they had a competition. And it wasn't even close. The people that made the pottery every day did far better than those trying to design and make the perfect piece of pottery. So I think the lesson there is just, do. Right. It's far better than think about it and read about it. And,
It's funny that you say that too, because I feel like some of the best stuff is the stuff I'm just playing around with. And I'm not like going in there with like a purpose, like, oh, I have this all planned out. I'm going to make this, where I'm making something, say, for example, for students. I'm like, ooh, I kind of like this. I'm just going to keep going with it and just play around. There's like no pressure. And I feel it's like that pressure of like trying to make something and design it and trying to make something like a strong piece, where when the pressure's to stop, you're like, oh, I'm just playing around in the art studio. I'm just putting this together and just messing around. Usually it comes out a lot better. So
yeah, so much more fun and more, I think that natural creative just comes out. Once your brain, I think we put blocks up when we're trying to do something in particular.
Right.
And then we just kind of leave all the walls down.
Right. And kind of going back to like everything you were saying, just like with anything, is you just go in there and show up and I'm just going to make something. It might not turn out very well, or I'm just going to do this project. It might not turn out, but it's like you said, that repetition of just showing up and just trying over and over and over again. And suddenly things start to kind of click because you've done it already 100 times or whatever.
Yeah.
X amount. But
so after art school, what was next for you?
Oh gosh. So trying to think back, it's kind of hard. I think that's why I'm
getting old now.
It's like, dang, I haven't really thought about this in a while. So I feel like in art school, like, I don't know. I feel like I've always didn't really know exactly. I always thought I'm going to be an art teacher, so I feel like so many people around me were working hard towards like, I'm going to be a character designer for video games, or I'm going to be going into gallery work, or I'm going to be doing editorial work or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just trying to get through these classes and make this like still life look really good because I'm going to be an art teacher. And so it wasn't until probably like my last couple of years of being at CCS that I had to choose like a focus. So I focused in on watercolor. And so I tried to get better at that. And it was, my professors that I worked with were mostly acrylic painters or oil painters. So you know, it would help me with watercolor and things like that. But I feel like I was mostly on my own, just kind of figuring out, kind of like we were talking about, just experimenting and trying to figure out how to use watercolor. So when I got out of college, I was considered as a watercolor painter and art teacher. So I was just a substitute art teacher for a while. I mostly just tried to get art subbing jobs, but I subbed everywhere. So I was trying to work towards being an art teacher. I remember like my professors, like on our exit interview, was like, you have to present all your artwork that you, like your strongest pieces. And then once I was all done with my spiel, they kind of looked at me and it's like, and I said, I'm going to be an art, like, what are you trying to plan to do after college? I'm like, well, I'm going to be an art teacher. Like, oh, you can always do that. Like, you're really strong in your illustration and you should, you know, I thought you can go in this avenue and give me different opportunities. Like, you can always go back to teaching. But I was like, I'm going to be a teacher.
Yeah.
But I still kind of want to be an artist. It's always been kind of like in the back of my head, like, oh, I'm going to be an artist and an art teacher.
Yeah.
So after college, I worked towards just getting my certificate, which I took a long time because I struggled with like reading and math and writing. Those were like the things you had to do for your test. So I was just really focusing on those things.
That's the teaching certificate?
Yeah. So once I got my teaching certificate after like 10 attempts, I finally got it. So I tried to finally land a art teacher job. But I was still doing like painting here and there, my own things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, where was that? Was that in Michigan here still?
Yeah, I was still in Michigan. So at that point, I was teaching, but I still was making my own like watercolor things, just still kind of copying things and sketching and whatnot. So I got into more portrait. I found myself kind of, I'm not a specific time when I'm like, I'm going to do portraits. But I was like, oh, I'm going to just draw some like dogs and people. And then somebody would say, oh, can you draw like my house or can you draw my dog? So then I started kind of thinking of going that way. So for a while there, I was just doing portraits, mostly pets and houses.
Is any of that work, were you selling any of this? Were you?
It wasn't enough to, let's say, make a living off of.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest like struggle, right? It's like trying to find like as far as like an artist, like trying to make art and making a living off it. It's always like a journey and trying to get there. And so I was doing a lot of house portraits for just anybody. It was mostly just word of mouth or a friend of a friend.
Yeah.
So it started off as like for friends, and then I heard they see the house on the person's like mantle, and they're like, oh, who did that? So they're like, oh, I'm friends with so and so. So a lot of it was like just word of mouth of wanting to get a portrait done. Same with like pets, and so I was doing that for a while. But the problem was, like, I enjoyed doing it, but I just didn't feel like I was being creative in a way. It's like it was almost like I'm just doing this because I can do it.
Yeah.
And you would say, oh, you're so talented. It's like, yes. This always like always struggled with when it's like, oh, you're so talented. I said, yes, I could have a talent to like paint, but I don't feel I'm creative.
Yeah.
And I remember watching, I think it was Little Woman on like the newest Little Woman. I think she was like struggling with that. One of the girls was like in Paris and she was looking at over like her classmates like still life, and hers looked really good. And she looked at her classmates and it was like just different colors and just more creative. And she's like realizes like, yes, I'm talented, but I'm not creative. Like, and I'm like, that's exactly how I feel sometimes. Like,
sure, sort of.
I can paint well and I can draw well, but I just feel like I couldn't find that way to be creative and make it my own. Because I'm just merely kind of going back to like when you're like an adolescent, you're just copying things. And so I was really good at just copying what I can see.
I think I've struggled with that in my creative aspects. It's just frustrating just taking a photo without being, as a photographer, having to just take a photo of somebody versus being able to be creative with it. It's just a whole different level of like whether it's senior photos or whatever. Hey, we want to here and here and here.
Yeah.
Well, especially for athletes, I'd much rather do, hey, you dive in front of the net or taking a shot or do some cool lighting or something.
Find ways to be creative.
Yeah. Because otherwise it sort of gets boring after a while. You kind of get there and understand lighting and, some of the other aspects first, but yeah, exactly I can relate.
Saying. Yeah, it's like you can make it look nice. Okay, we have the lighting over here. We have you sitting in front of this background. It's like, okay, I could take a nice picture. Like, these look really nice. And then, kind of same thing. Like, I'm painting. I'm like, this looks really good. And then it's like, So I try to get more creative with it. I thought, well, I'll see if I can keep this going. So I was like how I was talking about before. Like, it was still kind of a journey even outside of school. And that's why I realized I still learned a lot at CCS. Like I loved being there. So I don't want to make it sound like it was like a waste of time, because it definitely wasn't. But I found other ways to find like, oh, I'm going to find other artists or ways to kind of show like how can we paint with watercolor a little bit more freely or loosely, or more, like I said, trying to get more creative. And so it was really kind of scary when you start something new, because you're just trapped or like used to just doing the same things. So I'm trying to stay in the right path, what I'm trying to say. I was trying to find a way to be creative with portraits and houses and pets, because like we were talking about, it just didn't seem like at least I was boring, and I just didn't feel like I was being creative. So I tried to find other ways to try and bring some creativity into that. So, and that's what I was mentioning. I was like, it's kind of scary, because like this is what I was used to. So I feel like I was going to mess it up. And I think it's like the biggest struggle even now is like, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up the paper or waste the paint. And you can't have that fear when you're trying to grow as an artist. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to do it. So I just started like trying to find ways. Like, for example, I was trying to start the whole page with like yellow, and I'm like, this doesn't seem it's going to work. But then it really started to work, and I was feeling like I was getting more creative with it. But then it was the same kind of like feeling of like, I just don't think I want to paint pets anymore. I have to not be afraid to just try something new. But then after a while, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. But then it's like the dilemma, like, okay, well, now what am I going to do? Because that's kind of scary as well. It's like I was doing portraits and pets. I'm like, I don't know if this is what I want to do. And at this point in time, I had my first son, and I kind of took a step back from teaching, because I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to still teach, or I want to still, what was I going to say? Yeah, I didn't know if I was still going to be a teacher, or I just want to be a mom, or, drop it all together. So I kind of took that break too, to kind of just figure out what I wanted to do. So that's when I still was doing portraits, but then I was like, okay, now I don't know if I want to do this. So then I decided to switch it up again.
So a couple things. Where were you at here? I'd like to at some
Keep
point.
the timeline, yeah.
I know you. Yeah, that's okay. No,
That's cool.
I know you were in Mexico for a little bit, and I'd like to chat a little bit about your ArtPrize experience. And we can just get into that whenever.
And that's, I think, the problem is why I keep jumping ahead, is because I feel like I've done so many things, and that's the hard part. Kind of goes back to what I was saying, as when you said like, oh, what is it like with little Liz? It's like, well, I like to do everything. I want to do all the things, and I definitely have I forget what they abbreviate it, but fear of missing out.
Sure.
Yeah, all the time. So I'm like, well, I gotta do that. I want to do that, and as soon as I do something else, like, oh, I'll drop that thing and be like, I want to do this. So when I was doing portraits and things, at this point, I was living in Canton when I wanted to like drop it. I was living in Canton, Michigan for like a short time, because we were in between of like where we want to live as a family. So going back to your question, we were in Mexico for about a year and a half, because my husband, Ben's job was, pushed him over to Mexico for a little bit. So when I was there, I was volunteering with an organization that's no longer there, called I believe it was Restore, and it was like an after-school program for the community. And so I went there to kind of volunteer teaching art classes, not even art classes, but just like an art pop-up workshop. Like, hey, we're all going to learn how to make this puppet together.
Sure.
So with all the other kids, and they were all range of different kids. So the program was to help kids like with their homework or after school, and help the families that maybe have endangered. I feel like it's been so long, so I hope that I'm saying this correctly.
Yeah.
But they would help the families too to prevent their kids from being placed into like the orphanage system. So they would work with the parents to either find like jobs, or work with them to help with like necessities that they might need for their kids. So they would offer like swim lessons and music lessons, and also help with their relationship with Jesus, and also they asked me to like share like and help with doing like some art and things like that. Oh, and also like helping with sports. So like a lot of like extra classes of supporting them in their school endeavors as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was helping with them in Mexico, and at the same time, I wasn't teaching or anything. So I was really focusing on, again, like what I want to do. So I was still doing portraits and things like that, but I was also it's just so funny, because I just keep like I've been jumping around. It's so funny.
Oh, you're fine.
Back. So I was jumping around like all the time, like what I want to make. So I was focusing on maybe getting into enamel pins and getting more into design work. So I was designing like enamel pins and trying to design like like brands, but I felt like I was just so jumping around, and I always had that back in my mind of like, I'm just an imposter. That's why I don't know what I'm doing, because like I'm just doing everything. And so we're focusing on like enamel pins and just doing random things. So I at one point too, I was trying to make like a fake brewery, and it sounds like so random because
No.
my husband Ben was kind of into making beers back in the day, and so like I'll make like a fake like beer brand. So I started making like labels and things like that for this like fake brewery that I was like imagining and things. So just finding ways to be creative while I was in Mexico was basically what I was kind of like doing at that point in time, is just making random things.
Did the culture or volunteering with the kids or working with the kids, did any of that like impact either your art or your just philosophy on life at all?
That is a very good question. I've always admired like children's art. That's always been something that I loved. And picture books is something that I've been a big collector of as well, because I just love like the whimsy of it and the playfulness of children's art and artwork that's towards children
Yeah.
or targeted towards children. So I feel like it's always had some kind of influence because I liked those kind of factors. So I always try to put it in my art a little bit. So if I'm making, kind of like what you're saying, like when I wasn't having like a plan and I'm just like drawing or sketching something, it always fell to like the whimsical kind of imaginative kind of world. So
Yeah.
animals like in clothing, or like silly scenarios of just like of scenes of just animals or pictures or nature and things. So anytime it wasn't like a set plan, it's kind of funny you're mentioning because I'm like realizing this kind of at
Yeah.
the same time of just like it was always was just this very playful like creatures in a way.
So yeah, some of that whimsical, children's type art was really some of the stuff I liked the most. I saw some of your recent mushroom and frogs and toad type stuff. And then back in ArtPrize, you had these farm animals
Yes.
that were really cool. I thought you could do a whole lot with them.
Yes,
It was just
that's exactly
really
what I
fun.
thought when I was explaining that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because when I made those back in college because I was wanting to get more into ArtPrize. So long story short, those animals you're talking about was kind of just a random story. I asked somebody to just give me some just random animals and asked if they could be friends, and I started just kind of imagining like, well, maybe it's because one was just very I can't think of the right word, but he was very like thinks he's all that, so because he can spin plates. And the other animals were just, he thought they were just jealous, so he leaves to go to the circus, and he realizes that all the other animals there are just like him and treating him the same way. I think they're all great and talented, and that he's not that great. So he goes back to his friends, realizing like, oh, I just been treated the same way, like I just treated my friends. So when he comes back, he decides to teach them how to spin plates. So that's what the illustrations were all about, and that's kind of we realized I really like making stories and just or based on either experiences or just memories. So some of my other illustrations at that time this is probably the end years in college, were a lot about memories. So when I worked I was a camp counselor at Center Lake Bible Camp, and then I was also with my friends at church doing like a bluegrass kind of fundraiser for our mission trips, that I made illustrations for those things, but like an animal whimsical kind of form. So like my camp counselor days, a lot of the animals were, like little campers, like all these little animals and things, or like, swimming at the lake. And then the bluegrass group kind of fundraiser thing was all these barnyard animals with instruments and having like a party. So yeah, now that's kind of what I'm doing, going back to those things.
Yeah.
Is what I'm doing kind of
I
now.
love that stuff personally.
Yeah.
I think that has
Same.
a story, and there's story with it. And it sounds like it's like in your soul a little bit, whatever that looks like.
Right. It's kind of like goes back to like what your whys are as an artist, like why you want to create, why you want to make things. And for me, it's always, I'm a sucker for nostalgia. I like thinking about or seeing stuff from like my childhood, or like things from the past, and like old fashioned things, and just like memories.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of people connect with things that remind them of something, or, that they remember when they were younger, or something that they recently experienced. And so I like to try and tie those things a lot in my illustrations, I've come to realize. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now.
I think that's the important part, story and everything really plays such a role. And if you can see a story, or people can like pull their story out of it, or
Right.
connects with. There's a lot of things we experience, even that you're talking about, whether it's through childhood or adults. We kind of go through some of that stuff.
Kind of go back to what you're saying too, is if the children's art ever influenced my art or influenced me, it kind of goes the same thing. It's like they're so imaginative and easily to come up with a story or scenario or copying, even if they copy something they really love, you know, like their cartoons and shows, sometimes it sparks the creativity of how they draw things. And it breaks my heart when there's like, oh, this looks so bad. I'm like, I just wish I could tell you how much I wish I could be that loose and that expressive. Because you lose it sometimes, I think, because you're just trying so hard to be realistic. I'm like, I draw this like apple realistically. Where a child's like, they just draw, like, they're like, I did the best I could. And they want to draw realistically, but I want to go back to that, like that expressive, loose kind of feel. And that's kind of where I'm trying to go as well. But I always find myself still just trying to be like super realistic when I'm trying to get that whimsical playfulness that young children have. And so, kind of like when I'm going back to those things that I made for ArtPrize is when I really wanted to get more into children's book illustration because I liked the story and I liked the whimsy, and I'm a big collector of children's books and just wanted to be like one of them. So I started kind of going that direction. And so I started with self-publishing children's books with self-published authors. So what kind of happened was a friend of a friend sent my information to somebody. Said, hey, they're looking for, someone asked me if you do children's book illustration. Like, would you do that? So then I thought, that's what I want to do. So I started going that direction at that point. So this is when I was still living in Detroit. So I was moved back from Mexico, living in Detroit, and I got more into children's book illustration at that point.
For those of you listening,
still was a teacher though at that point.
Okay. We'll try to throw up some of this as we've been talking. We want to add some of this artwork on screen. So those of you watching on YouTube can probably find a lot of this. We'll try to throw this in every now and then so people can kind of see what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going back to it, I'm a little bit wrong on the timeline. So in Mexico, that's when I first made the first children's book I made.
Okay.
Funny enough. It's so hard to think about where all these things fall because I just did so many random things.
Yeah.
So I made technically the book in Mexico, which is kind of funny to think about. But that was the Science with Scarlet, What Color Will It Be by Gary Aboud Jr. And so at that point when I got back, that's when I started kind of getting to that route a little bit while still teaching art.
Awesome. Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, so many things you've done makes it for a much more interesting life. I think it might not be the most financially rewarding at this point.
Yeah.
But, you're also building up so many different skill sets and such a broad view of things.
Right.
To me, it's super interesting, all the different
I'm
stuff
just thankful for the support I've had.
Yeah.
With Ben and my family and friends. Yep. It's to be able to do that. And it's that guilt of man, I feel like I'm not contributing. So even so I was I got to stay with teaching so I can help in some way. I'm not just saying, I feel like it's always that stereotype. You're just staying home and just coloring things. It's no, I'm trying so hard here. I'm really trying really hard to try and make something that's sustainable. But yeah, it's hard to do. That's kind of getting to what's going on right now is trying to do all the things has been really hard.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, the struggle of.
Yeah, so I'm teaching art. I teach K through 7th grade art right now. And I have 2 children now, and I'm married. And I live in Holland, Michigan now. So I got out of Detroit and kind of doing something totally different. And going back to what I said, it's I want to do all the things and try and make it work and also have a life. So it's kind of hard. So I have to kind of figure out and pick and choose what do I have to focus on right now. So sometimes being an artist is on the back burner of things, but kind of going back to that's deep down inside. I feel like a lot of artists you want to make something, you want to create, you want to build something up, and so that's where I'm kind of the struggle at.
What do you do to get away and do some art?
How do I do to do that? Well, that's why I really like being an art teacher in a ways because. Kind of what we were mentioning before is just putting the playfulness into teaching. So as I'm making an example for the students, I'm I kind of like this. And that's kind of my creative outlet when I can't create or sit down, go to the studio or go at home and sit at my kitchen table and make something I want to make. I kind of get that release in a way when teaching like art with children.
Yeah.
So I start getting into like making the examples, or sometimes if I'm lucky enough to be able to sit alongside them and make art with them and do the things that they're doing. So kind of get my creative fill, and that way when I can't sit down and be like, I'm going to make the things I'm hoping to make.
I think there's a couple things, you know, I just turned 50, a friend of mine, we're kind of business entrepreneurship, creative, a little bit of everything too. Like we feel like we're good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing. But also, you know, somebody else reminded me, you don't have to be, I mean, being great at one thing isn't necessarily the best. We don't need everybody to do that either. There's a lot of value in teaching little kids art, spending time with them.
Yeah.
Maybe that one-on-one time that mom and dad are both working, they don't get this creative outlet. They don't get this little bit of inspiration, storytelling. And I think we undervalue a lot of the little things we do day to day, whether it's smiling at somebody walking around or just, you know, buying somebody coffee, all this little stuff that we give into the world. I think we undervalue that too much sometimes.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you can't be too hard on ourselves.
Right. Absolutely. I know it's hard not to be hard on yourself.
Yeah.
You said a lot there that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
One of the things I can't remember all of it now, but one of the things was trying not to, like, you don't have to be great at one thing. And I think sometimes that is true. You can kind of like jump around, but then sometimes it's like, okay, I got to choose the one thing and stick with it and get really good at it. And that's kind of what I had to figure out at this point. And that's where I'm at currently in this timeline. So
Perfect segue.
I started kind of listening to an artist named Josie Lewis.
Okay.
And she does a lot of rainbow painting, abstract kind of art, very colorful and fun. And started kind of taking some of her advice a little bit here. I would save like videos here on Instagram here and there. She's awesome. I really like her. And that's the thing too. I'm trying not to stay. Gotta stay on this, stay on course of my thought here. But kind of going back to what we were saying, like, I try to follow a lot of different artists, even the ones I'm like, I would never probably make that, or it's not exactly my cup of tea. But I really admire their way of doing things, or their style or advice. So anyway, she started kind of saying, like, you have to choose the one thing. I know it's really hard to choose one thing, but that's how you start kind of getting attention or following. It's like, hey, you're that mushroom person, or you're that, you know, that photographer, or you're that one person that does that. So she's known for doing the rainbow art stuff. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna have to just pick something here. As I was at this cross, I'm like, I'm not doing portraits anymore. And that was the hard part, is like turning people down. They said, oh, you were so good at it. I really liked it. I said, I know, but just like my heart and soul is not in it. And same with like children's books. I'm like, I love doing it, but it's like, I kind of want to do my own thing. So I was like, well, what is that one thing? So I just kind of just chose something I was like currently starting getting interested in, which is mushrooms and fungi.
Yeah.
Which seems so kind of random again. It's like,
It is very unique, you know.
it's like, yeah, it's like, here I go again, just choosing the most random thing again. And like, going, like, but I'm going to stick with it this time. Like Josie Lewis was saying, you know, like just sticking with it. So I chose one thing, and I learned a lot from Michigan Mushroom Hunters, which is run by Andrew. I'm going to say his last name wrong, so I'm sorry. I'm going to say your last name wrong. Andrew, I think it's Fletcher. Fletcher. I want to say Fletcher, but I don't think it's right. Okay. Anyways, Andrew taught me a lot about fungi, and specifically, he one day just said, like, this is like back when I lived in Detroit, just gave me a random like artist conch mushroom, which is like, you want this artist conch mushroom? I think it'd be really cool to you would like make something on it, since you're a really good artist at drawing, and I can see you making something on this really cool. And he mentioned ArtPrize. Like I would love to like do something together for ArtPrize, and I can help you like find, you know, these mushrooms, and we can work together maybe on a project. So that's kind of what was always in the back of my mind, that I really liked, like illustrating on a mushroom. So I chose that because I'm like, I like that.
Yeah.
So I started, I already had some artist conch mushrooms already, so I started going in that direction. So I focused on that for like a month, kind of like we were talking about, just repetition and trying to get good at this one thing. And I found a lot of like, I feel like I'm sometimes like a small breakthrough. I feel like I'm not there at the breakthrough yet, but a small breakthrough, like, oh my gosh, I think this is working. And I think this is maybe the right direction I need to go in. Kind of going to like, I feel like I could be creative in this now. And so I felt really excited. I'm like, this is it. This is finally the thing.
Yeah.
But I still like, sometimes I still have like ideas to do other things too. And I can talk about that later.
Well, I think one thing, again, I listened to a lot of other podcasts, and Jocko Willink, I think, was talking about discipline, and it's probably brought up by somebody else,
Yeah.
but so discipline is freedom, and limitations can be freeing. So by sticking to the one thing, it kind of removes all the clutter of the distraction, and you can kind of focus within that and be much more free, even though it's one thing.
Yes, it's like finding ways, exactly, finding ways to find freedom and just doing the one thing. So, and I have been kind of feeling, and sometimes I feel like I'm finding little cheats along the way, because what I'm trying to do now is build a brand.
Yeah.
And since I like to do a little bit of everything, but I'm trying to put it in a focus for X amount of time now. So like I've been focusing on fungi for like a few months. Then I'm like, I'm going to try printmaking now, but still having a unifying theme. So going back to what I was saying, like the whimsical, playful, and nature kind of subject is where I'm kind of focusing on, because I think I've always felt that way, because I really enjoy being around nature and being immersed in like children's books. So I'm trying to combine and keeping that focus through this brand that I'm trying to build.
And I think it's great, like focusing aspect, because you can do illustrations, you can do like, I don't know what you call it, 3D or active mushroom work.
Kind of goes back full circle why I got into illustration at College Creative Studies, because I chose illustration as a major because you can do all these things. Like you say like draw an apple and put that on clay, or draw an apple and put it on a mushroom, draw an apple and paint it on cards and make prints and do this and that. And so I feel like illustration is kind of like a foundation to kind of go into other avenues in a way. So
Yeah.
So
I don't know what do you call it? Artist conch, mushroom conch?
artist conch, C-O-N.
I don't even know what that is.
I'm the worst speller ever, but I figured it out.
Tell people what that is for those listening or watching.
Sure. I have one right here on the table, and I feel
right,
it'd be
great.
better to explain it if I hold it up. And
Perfect.
if you're listening to this, you'll have to go on YouTube and find it. But this is what it looks like right here. And it's kind of looks like this one's kind of a really mushy looking one. But I also have another one here holding up by this lovely plant here. Well, this one's not any better. So I'm going to put that one back. You're going to go back right there. Stay. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we can look at that a little closer in a minute.
Hold on. Stay there. Okay, be a good mushroom. There we go. So this one's a little bit better. So like an artist conch, you probably see when I ask people, like, have you heard of an artist conch? Or some people say a shelf mushroom. They say no.
Stumper or
but then when I say like, oh, well, have you seen it like walking down the woods and you've seen a mushroom kind of stick out like this? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, that's most likely one of these. And so an artist conch mushroom is a shelf kind of mushroom that grows out like this. My hand's like the log or the wood or the stump. Grows out like this. And then what's really cool about the mushroom is...
Hey guys, thanks for watching the podcast today or listening online. We just want to say thank you to the Palmer Group, our sponsor today. That's myself, Elizabeth, Joni, and the rest of the crew at 616 Realty, who help us help you. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, build, or have any other real estate problem, we'd love to help. We are the real estate problem solvers here in West Michigan. And if we can't help you, then we'll connect you with somebody who can. Again, for more information, thepalmer.group, or reach out to us in the comments here. Thanks. Enjoy the show.
You'll notice that there's like rings on the mushroom itself. I don't know if you can kind of see that here. I can hold it up a little higher. But there's rings on the mushroom, and each of these rings, just like rings of a tree, show its age. The rings of the artist conch shows the number of rainfalls that have happened.
Really?
And the width of that ring shows how long it's been raining. And if I turn on its side and see how it's kind of lumpy, because each of those rings, however high the ring is, shows how heavy that rainfall was.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
From Michigan mushroom hunters. And I thought, that's crazy. So it's kind of like its own like weatherman in a way.
Yeah.
It kind of shows a little bit about its life.
It's got a story there, yeah.
Exactly. Like kind of like the life of the mushroom, how long he's been kind of sitting there. And some people say, does that mean like that's how old the mushroom is? And I would say not necessarily, because it could rain, multiple times a day, or like not rain for a few days. But that's kind of how mushrooms grow from what I'm still learning about fungi. But
sure.
They get all that moisture from the rain, and then they start growing and taking on those nutrients. So he just starts to expand. These can get really big. There can be really, really small ones. So I've made ones that are like really little. They can sit like on a windowsill. Probably the biggest one I have is like dinner plate size. But there's ones that can get as big as people can sit like on the shelf of the mushroom, apparently.
That's crazy, yeah.
Fungi just keep growing until they break off or something eats it or, yeah.
So, like when it's harvested from the tree to be used for art, is it soft? Is it hard? What's the texture of that?
Good question. So this is what it looks like on the top. And then on the back, it's a little more smooth, and usually it's white. But sometimes, it gets discolored because of rain or other things that get to it. So this one's a little darker. So when it's first cut, it's very porous. So there's like all these little pores, and you can actually press your finger into it, and it actually starts to bruise. It actually can hold your fingerprint like exactly, and it stays there. So it's really porous. Some artists that choose to work with this material actually use carving tools to carve into it, which I've tried. I used just handmade tools with like a paper clip and other things, and just poked at it and bruised it first before I started doing the next step. So it's that porous and kind of like damp like, and then after a couple days, it all completely dries out, so all the moisture leaves it, and it turns to like this like hard wood like state. So it almost feels like wood. That's why it's hard to believe that this is actually a mushroom.
Right.
Sometimes this is not a good example, but sometimes when you cut it clean off the wood, you can actually see like some of the fungi layers that seem kind of familiar to a mushroom.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't believe this is actually a fungi. So yeah, it turns like this wood-like state. And what a lot of artists do with this now is using a pyographing pen, which is like a wood burning tool. So I use a wood burning tool to burn into it, and that's what this mushroom is done. So sometimes if I have an idea the same day I cut it, I'll start maybe like bruising it a little bit sometimes. But most likely that's why I have to try not to get so precious with these because I'm like, I just want to go for it sometimes. But usually I'm like, I gotta wait because the shape, sometimes I'll play with the shape. Fun fact, this one was supposed to be a squirrel, but then I forgot because trying to find that time because I thought it looked like a squirrel with the head and the tail.
Oh yeah, I can see that for sure.
But anyways, I just made this one yesterday.
Okay, wow.
So yeah, I use a wood burning tool to get these dark contrasting tones. But there's some bruising in there. Just from when I harvest it, or sometimes I kick them down or I wiggle them around until they break off. That's another story anyways, but talking about the story about mushrooms. So I'll touch back on that later. But anyway, so once it's completely dry, it turns to this wood-like state. I can burn into it, and you can even still kind of carve into it. So some of this, I can hold it up.
Yeah, go ahead and show it because it might be hard on a monitor, but.
Yeah, so kind of see it right here.
There you go.
So you can't really see it. I can try and get as close as I can here, but like if you look at the log, it's at the bottom right there. It does have some carved features into it because I can burn right into that surface. And I've noticed some artists that can really get in there and really carve into it. Which I haven't tried that too much yet. I've made one that I wish I brought it, but I have one that's really big that has pumpkins and a cat on it.
Okay.
I've experimented a little bit trying to carve into like the grooves of like the pumpkin stem and try to give some kind of 3D factor to it. Well, maybe it's kind of going back to what you're saying is like you're just kind of I'm just starting out, but if I'm trying to focus on one thing, now I can actually try and put the time. It's like, well, what more can I do with this mushroom? Can I carve into it? Can I paint on it? Someone actually talked to me about like maybe making a print with it, so making a stamp with it. Like, can I carve into this mushroom and actually make a print, like a stamp? So there's a lot of experimentation there, which I really like, and that's what makes it kind of exciting. It's like, okay, I can always find more mushrooms. I just got to put in the time and not be so scared to just ruin a couple mushrooms. It's not a big deal, right? So I think I saw a quote a lot floating around online. It's like, it's only wasted paint if it sits in the tube.
Oh, for sure.
So like it's okay to waste paint because you're learning and growing, right? Kind of like we're going back to like, do you have to go, to school to study? It's like, no, you just got to experiment and try and explore and grow as an artist if you're trying to do that in your life. So
I think that goes for so many things.
Right. Well, kind of going back to before I forget, because it's kind of interesting. When I'm harvesting these mushrooms, I used to kick them down or just like wiggle, especially if they're really big. And sometimes I don't always have like a hatchet. A lot of these sometimes you might need a hatchet to get a clean cut because it is a fungi. Like a lot of these pieces on the mushroom can break. So one time, kind of when I was hunting around, because I just go down the like local woods or like trails that are nearby, and I'll just kind of peek out and see if there's anything sticking out of like some logs. I'm like, ooh, let's go check it out. So one day I was going to one of the trees and I saw one on the ground. And I said, "Ooh, look at that one!" And then I saw a big old toad like sitting
Oh, no
under
way.
it, like eating all these like insects because the insects were on the mushroom and eating whatever else that insects eat. And the frog with the not frog, a toad was just having a meal, like just eating them. I actually have a video of him like eating like the crickets and other like
That's awesome.
insects on
Yeah.
there. So I'm so glad because I usually take pictures of like the mushrooms I find or like a little video. So that's when I saw him. I was like, oh, no way. So I took a little video of him and I was like, I'm so glad I didn't just kick down the conch because I would have like probably hurt him or squish him. So from that point on, I said, I'm always going to check now, see if there's any critters
Yeah.
under the conchs. But that's what I really like about, so with that mushroom in particular, I actually made a toad on that one.
Perfect.
And that's what I really
Story.
like because I feel like when I show these mushrooms to people, sometimes they'll ask like, what has inspired this? Or like, why did you make a toad? It's like, well, it's funny they mentioned because this mushroom actually had a toad under it. And I decided like to put the toad on the mushroom that he was hanging out under. So, yeah, so I'm just trying to put those stories and things that I've enjoyed over the years into these mushrooms now. So now going back to what I was saying too, is just like now when I'm hunting and things, I'm just like, check for toads or other critters.
Yeah.
eating mushrooms.
Well, I think I love the story aspect of it. I mean, in terms of even from just sharing your art, but also from, financially, I'm far more interested in buying something that has a story with it. And when you can kind of share that story and that becomes part of the provenance, even,
Yeah.
all that stuff is
Absolutely.
far more valuable.
Someone else mentioned too, like one time they mentioned, it's like, it's so much more cooler to say that you got it from an artist than you got it from Amazon. Just saying.
Oh,
and it's
absolutely.
like, of course, yeah. And like you can always find like some cool stuff like at, Home Goods and things like that. But like to find something that's unique that has a story tied to it is so much cooler than being like, nothing wrong. I go to Home Goods all the time. But anyways, but it's like so much cooler to like find something that's unique and has a story tied to it or a memory, something that you connect with. Yeah.
That's what I love about art too. For me, my mom was arts and crafts her whole life. She did all kinds of stuff and all over the place too.
And how about you? Then if you've done it, arts and crafts?
As a kid, I did a ton. I mean, we had a ceramic store, so a lot of painting. I loved my art classes in school, illustrating.
Yeah.
I'd sit in, elementary. I would draw snowmobiles,
I love that.
and on hills and stories and stuff. Like just fun
Because you always have a creative element.
things. Yeah, I enjoy
Always like being creative.
that stuff.
So you've always kind of done the same.
Yeah, and even the photography stuff is cool. I think everybody has some of that in them, and they might express it in different ways. Might express it through growing a business.
Right.
But yeah, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
As we kind of wrap up and get close here, any takeaways you think? What are you excited about? I guess let's go there first about what's next.
So yeah, I kind of mentioned before, I'm trying to build a brand now. That's kind of like been my focus, and it's called Mushabloom Studio. And why Mushabloom is because I've always kind of been inspired by the song Feist called Mushaboom.
Okay.
It's about kind of like living the simple life, kind of like carefree. And I always liked the idea of just living simply, and just kind of like being relaxing, like just being chill, I guess.
Yeah.
So I kind of adapted it and made it my own in that way. So Mushabloom instead. So kind of like having this brand of just, of what am I trying to say? Just like a more calm and kind of relaxing kind of like vibe.
Yeah.
With a little bit of whimsy and play.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm building this brand of just a little bit of mushrooms, mostly focused on mushrooms and just handmade items.
Okay.
And still kind of keep some of my painting roots. So I've got a lot of like watercolor and mushroom themes throughout everything and what I'm making currently. And it's exciting because I'm still kind of trying to just nail it down. And I think that's why I'm having trouble like explaining it. So it's still kind of like in the works.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to be like going into a direction that I feel excited about versus just like trying to stay stuck in something I'm not really all in. So
it seems like there's a nice through line for you where you can kind of dabble in a lot of things, but it's still one thing. It's mushrooms.
Yeah.
And there's more to it than mushrooms, but
right.
a common thread.
Sometimes like right now we're in the winter season and it's hard to be like, well, what can I do if I don't have the mushrooms? So I've been trying to find other avenues I really enjoy that like
Related.
for some time. Yeah. And just kind of applying it to what I'm kind of trying to build and create.
Cool. So where can people find you? Online or wherever?
Yeah. Instagram, Facebook currently right now. So it's Mushabloom Studio. Yeah. So I would hope that you would go and check it out.
Perfect.
That's you. And you also can sign up for things and find more of my stuff.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I appreciate you being here. Anything else you want to share before we wrap?
Not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so bad at like closing out these things.
No, this is good.
I would say go out there and find your own mushrooms out there and give it a try.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to try something new and create something. So that's my piece of advice, I guess, is if you want to create, just go ahead and do it.
Get going.
Even if it's bad, just do it. Just try it.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's pause for a moment to thank our sponsors, the Palmer Group with 616 Realty, a small experienced real estate team right here in West Michigan with over 20 years experience helping buyers, sellers, builders, and investors reach their real estate goals. We love to solve problems, and we're quite often known as the problem solver. So if you have a real estate challenge, want to look for that dream home, need help figuring out that tricky land deal, give us a call. We'd love to help. You can find more out at thepalmer.group. That's thepalmer.group, not thepalmer.com, thepalmer.group.
Tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want